So I'm Justin Brooks. I'm with King County Noxious Weeds. I'm specifically the riparian weed specialist for the Snoqualmie River. All right. So the talk I'm going to give today is honestly fairly similar to John's talk. We're going to talk about, what we've done in our program, kind of give the guide towards setting up your own project if that's something you are working towards. I will admit, in the 21 years that we've been doing these projects, we've never synthesized all of this information for people. So it's really interesting to put this together. A little bit challenging sometimes too. So bear with me. This is kind of a new scope for us. All right, so knotweed. Was there a clicker? There's a clicker. Cool. So you have knotweed. Now what? So first, so you have that knotweed. Now you're looking to figure out how to get started on that project. The number one thing really is that you want a really good reason to do this. The reason for that is that, for all intents and purposes, you're kind of going to put a ring on this. This is going to be a big project. It's going to go for a really long time. If you want to be successful, there's a lot of consistency that you have to maintain in order to be successful. Sorry, trying to.
Over there. You want it over here?
Yeah, how do I scroll my notes down? Just
like
use this one. Okay, got it. Okay. So you're going to be out there for a really long time. You need to be going into this, really need to be ready to have all those pieces in place so that you can continue, you can be consistent for that long period of time. Otherwise, success, whatever that is for you, isn't necessarily going to, you're not necessarily going to make that. Okay. A big component of this is capacity, making sure that your capacity is fairly static and you can get people out there consistently. You have a good crew, you have people who have done this before, at least a certain amount of them. And then all this is going to depend on your specific goals, what you're really looking to get done in this project. And that could be a wide range of things. So ultimately, you're looking to have that reason so that you can build this project in a way that's going to be successful. So for us, that reason ended up being landowners. We, in the beginning, so 2006, we really didn't want to start a knotweed project. We weren't looking to get into this. Ultimately, we had some landowners on the Snoqualmie River with a lot of knotweed. And they pressed us. They were like, hey, this is a really important thing. This is taking over the river. We saw this come in very rapidly, a few years prior. And they kept pushing. For us, that was a really big reason, really good reason to get going on the project, because we had already had interest from the public to get started. And that's a big piece of being successful in a knotweed project. If you've got that support from landowners, that ultimately is going to make you successful in the end. You're going to be responsible to them. They're going to keep driving you forward. So the next elements that we're going to talk about, in creating this presentation, we realized we really could just kind of go on forever. In fact, Glenn from Pierce Conservation District called me earlier this year and we talked about it. And I think I just unloaded for an hour and a half. So we're really going to kind of just do an overview of the major elements here. So survey scope and scale. Survey is going to be the most important piece that you need to have done before any of this gets going. You're going to need to know how much knotweed there is and where it's at in order to figure out how far you're going to be doing, you're going to be building your scale how far, like from the river, how far along the river, you're going to be doing all of this work. Without that, you really can't make any determinations on where or what you want to do, how feasible it's going to be, how much capacity, how much funding you're going to need. So in terms of creating that scope, that's going to include things everywhere from river miles, proximity to the river. Are you going to be just along the riverbank, or are you going all the way back on some of those properties? For us, that's changed over the years, given that, especially as we dropped into the lower Snoqualmie, some of those properties were huge, big farms. So you have to establish some priorities as to whether you're going to be working up close, right along the river, or you're also going to be getting the other stuff on that property. Sometimes it's nice to do that. You've already got permission, but maybe it's a little bit lower priority. It may not be, it's not going to be picked up and moved downstream like the knotweed right along the bank. This is also going to take into consideration remoteness and terrain. If you've got a ton of brush, if you've got big banks, sandy banks, no roads going into an area, these are all considerations you want to take into account in order to decide what areas you're going to be going to, because those areas take a lot more effort to get into. They take a lot more specialization, sometimes more equipment to get into, and that's all going to translate into your funding, how much funding you have to get going. The other thing to consider is, are there any other projects out there in the same area that you're working on or that you could piggyback on? So maybe another weed is being controlled in the same area. Maybe another partner is working on knotweed in the area. How can you bring those together to kind of synergize your project and get more out of more with less? I will fully admit that I don't know what's going on in that pie graph there, so just take it as a symbol of funding. So after you've established, your survey, you've picked your scale, you know what you're going to be getting after. Funding is obviously the big piece here. Funding can come from all kinds of places. For us, that originally was grants. The problem here with grants and knotweed is that grants tend to be a smaller period of time. Knotweed is a much longer project than almost all grants are going to provide money for. So some tips that we have found in the past in terms of funding is, especially if your project is larger than you think a single grant can scope, phase that. So reaching out to that grantor, and be like, hey, we want to do all this, but we're going to start here, and then we're going to start here, and then we're going to start here. A good reason for that is if you just take on the whole thing and get some level of initial control on all of it, you're now starting to move towards maintenance. Maintenance is still a very hard thing to fund. So if you can phase it, and each individual piece is a new set of initial work, you can get a lot more out of basically a lot more out of your grantors and funders that way. It also breaks it up nicely for you to work on. This is not something we did very well in our projects. I will fully admit to that, and took on kind of more than we could chew And ultimately you end up in kind of a little bit of a trough for a while you're catching up to where you're at. I guess for anybody who is looking to do this and you're looking for grants, the places we have done the best in finding grants, kind of salmon recovery funding, flood control, water quality has also worked. In recent years, we've moved over to a more programmatic funding. And so that means that we're accessing the tax base that our program has in order to do this work. That's an ideal way to get this done. When we were talking about consistency, that helps maintain that consistency. I'm not going to say it's perfect because it's not. Funding, in-house funding can move around as well, but at least you can start to plan for a little bit long-term situations. So once you've got your funding kind of figured out, and obviously we've kind of stacked all of these pieces together, they don't really line up exactly as we've done them. So some of these are going to be, you're going to be coming back to things. You're going to be deciding on something and then rehashing it, trying to figure it out. So capacity, you've probably already figured out what you need at this point because you had to do funding, you had to plan for that. But we just wanted to highlight that capacity is a really important piece here in terms of getting the work done and making sure that you're being consistent all the way through. Some things to take into consideration with capacity, are you going to be doing this through contract work? Are you going to be doing it in-house? There's a lot of benefits and downsides to either. With contractors, at least until you've worked with them for a bit, you don't fully know exactly what their capabilities are. And so there can be a lot of lead time in terms of getting them up to speed and where you need them to be for the project. In-house could be really nice, just because, especially if you're holding on to some of your people year to year, you kind of have that tribal knowledge where people know sites, they can get into that site easily, especially if they're difficult sites. They can help train everybody else. Problem with in-house is you also have you have to have that extra capacity in-house, all that overhead to manage that staff. Hiring, I can say, can be an onerous burden as well for a lot of these projects, especially when you're working, you got a budget that's coming off of grants. Just the process of getting through hiring can take up a lot of your year. So something to consider, especially when you're looking at funding. All right. I can't say how important partnerships are in knotweed. And this can be on any level, from partnerships with your landowners to partnerships with other agencies, other groups that are doing that work. Any of those relationships that you can build help synergize your project and help make things more successful in the long run. We've worked with a number of partners on ours. Oftentimes we'll collaborate, we'll do one thing, they'll kind of help out with another piece. Maybe they're going to be covering a certain number of properties, we're covering the others. If you can, in any of those ways, break up that work to serve both all the interested parties, you're going to make your project ultimately more successful. Another key piece to that is, weeds don't follow our rules at all, right? So maybe you have an off year, for instance, couple years ago, I had to take care of my father. I was out for the whole year. That left the rest of my crew to cover my project. Partnerships become really helpful at those times. Sometimes, when you're trying to cover some of those situations, partners can step in and take care of a little bit more, keep that project moving in a way that's going to keep everything up to speed when everything else comes back online. All right, education and outreach. This kind of goes right alongside partnerships as being a really key part of any knotweed project. As a number of people have said, like landowners and landowner permissions are probably one of the hardest pieces in getting a project together. Education and outreach is how we go out into those communities and we build a culture around the thing that we're trying to do. So that can be everywhere, anything from workshops to signage, to pamphlets, to actually going out and individually talking to your landowners, just being present so that they can talk to you. Those are probably the biggest ways that we've made connections and gained trust with our landowners, is just being there for them to talk to you about their problems on their property. May not even pertain to knotweed at all. If they think you're there to help them, whatever that is, they're gonna jump on board a lot quicker and be a functioning relationship for you and your project. All right. So from here on out, I'm gonna kind of cover some of the best practices, in terms of best practices, these are things that are going to come in at some point on your project. So this is going to include any permitting that you're going to need, any licensing, any certificates that your staff is going to need to do the work. Implementing safety protocols. Knotweed grows in some really crappy places, dangerous places. You're on the water. So making sure that you've got all of those safety protocols in place. For us, that's built up over the years. I feel like every year we've established something new. We've learned that we should probably have this or probably have that. I will say that, all the advancements in technology can really help and have really helped with our safety protocols. For instance, for us now, we use Quick Capture for taking all of our data. So you start your tracks, you can take all of the information right there, right at the top. That's the screen we have open all the time. Right at the top of the screen, it has a button that we can press to give us the closest emergency services. So doing things like that can really, really help. This also includes treatment, making sure everybody's trained up, what they're doing, getting people out in the field just to see things move through that space. Riparian work especially can be onerous and hard, and having everybody know where they're at and what they're dealing with is really important. And then the last piece I want to mention is a management plan. Hey, here's our goals. Here's where we want to go. Here's what we're going to do with maintenance. Here's how we're going to make this decision and that decision. We didn't do that. We are currently working through that. So I'm saying from experience, if you can get that done from the get-go, I highly recommend it. Finally, reporting. It's probably the thing none of us really want to do, but it has gotten easier, especially with all the technology that's out there. And it's incredibly important because this is how people know what you're doing, how you're successful. This is going to feed into that, building that culture with all of your partners, all of your landowners, them knowing what you've done, how you've done it, and ultimately that you're being successful. That comes back to benefit you in funding and general support. Okay. I don't have much time here, so I'll get through as many of these things as we can, but there's just a few kind of equipment and specific technical details that we wanted to make sure we covered or for interest. So we get this question a lot, so I just wanted to throw it out there. As far as aquatic Mazipure, we're using 1% and 1.5 of an aquatic surfactant. We use Agridex. And I also want to mention that taking advantage of the herbicide program through John Stills is incredibly important. We've done a lot of that over the years in getting this done. It's been a huge help. The other mix we've used, and really this only comes up for Forest Service properties now because you cannot use imazapyr every year on those properties. So we're using 5% aquatic glyphosate and then that 1.5% aquatic surfactant. We have tried 4% glyphosate because 5% you run through your herbicide really fast. We have found in the little bit of trials that we've done that 5% works a whole lot better than 4. Twin neck bottles, also known as Bedex bottles. These have been a huge help for us in terms of just measuring rather than going into a graduated cylinder. You can just squeeze the bottle, get it up to the milliliters you need, throw that in. Makes mixing a whole lot easier, especially when you're mixing on the river, which we do a lot, especially in our more remote areas like the Skykomish River or the Upper South Fork when we get really far up there on the Snoqualmie. This has really been a game changer for us. Rinse-aid bottles. We've been hauling a lot of these around and just rinsing straight into there. We were finding that, our standard blackberry patch or other weed patches on site, we're kind of spraying them every year. We're just kind of putting out a lot of, rinse-aid or a little bit of chemical that kind of controls things, it's just out there. So by doing this, we've been able to then turn, as long as it is clean, we don't have a whole lot of detritus or something like that in there, we can turn that around and it can go back in our packs for the next round. We're using the lowest effective rate for Mazipyr at 1%. Per bottle, we can go up to 5. So having that little bit of extra herbicide in there isn't taking us over the or per acre or anything like that. I think I mentioned this. Smartphones have been a huge deal for us. We started out with GPS units. We now have everything right there. You only have to take one unit into the field. You're not carrying AA batteries to reboot your GPS. We do carry an extra battery pack to keep these running because especially as they start to get older and you're running a lot of GPS, they do wear down. So, but this has allowed us to run field maps, see all of our maps, where we've been, who's where, what, get on site, get onto the knotweed that we saw last year, as well as faster data collection. This has been a big one for us as well. We've found as we get older and more into this our years in treating knotweed, we like having to plow through blackberry less and less. I think everybody would agree with. So we've actually started using these battery powered hedge trimmers. And one of the batteries in here, unless you're really going at a hedge all day, that battery will last you pretty much the whole day. They can be really great. They aren't great at taking down big swaths. This is more for cutting trail and access. You can cut down larger areas, but I would turn more to a brush cutter for that. If anybody is interested in these, I will say they do require a little bit of kind of touchy maintenance. There's a resin spray that comes with it, plus an oil. You want to make sure you get that resin on there to break up, or that resin spray to break up the resin from the plants so that your blades don't stick together. Because once that dries, you go to hit the trigger and your motor automatically it gives you an overheat. And that's not something you can fix in the field. It has to actually go into the shop at that point. So a little bit of a problem there. Just make sure you get the sprays on, the oil on, and they work fine. I'll cover these really quick because I think a number of people have done this. We've been working with the inflatable kayaks for quite a while. Great for access. The other one would be our cataract. We use this more for anywhere where we have deep water and steep banks, and also have a lot of blackberry. So one person pilots, the other person's up front spraying. I will admit, I love this thing. I do wish it was this is like a 12-footer. I wish we had a little bit longer version. You wouldn't be so tippy front and back with people moving around and that kind of thing. And then just some essentials. And I wouldn't say that we have these figured out at all, but you're out there, it's remote. You're probably away from the truck or the car for a long period of time. Making sure that everybody has some access to, food, water, a solid med kit, extra battery banks, walkie-talkies, or, a beacon if you're going to be way out there, is really essential. You can also be out there, you're also out there walking around with a large backpack, and it can be hard to carry some of that stuff. This is one way that this has been covered for us. You can see Aaron's has a little backpack kind of strapped to the back of the pack. Usually there's a waterproof bag inside that will throw lunch and everything in. That way, if you do have issues with the pack, it's not going to, soak your lunch as well, because that's the last thing. I would say that water has probably been the hardest one for us in terms of making sure that everybody has enough water. It's hot, it's summer. People can require 3 to 5 liters while they're out there, and they're certainly not going to carry that. So people will carry things. We've used filters, all that kind of stuff. It all works to some degree, but if anybody runs across anything else, definitely let us know. We're still figuring that one out. All right, that's it.